Hey aspirants, welcome to Insights ICANN initiative. First of all, I apologize for not being able to complete the video for Saturday as promised because of ill health. So don't worry, we'll try to cover all of the missed out topics in the consecutive days to come. So, with this, we'll start with the first topic of the day, which has a lot to do with our previous episode related to shareholder capitalism. So, today, this article is talking about enlightened capitalism. It's about growing enterprises in a time tested Indian way. So, basically, this in the previous article, if you saw, on the previous episodes, shareholder capitalism was mentioning about a different orientation towards doing business, and this particular idea of enlightened capitalism is mentioning of how India has always done the business, and how it has led to many successful brands growing up. So if you see, according to the author here, there are four important criteria which determines enlightened capitalistic enterprises. So the criteria will include respect. These entities will be respected and loved by the society. The second criteria of their identification would be economic efficiency through longevity. So, what is the meaning of this? It means that longevity would be the measure of this company's efficiency or effectiveness. So, the third criteria here would be creating shared wealth, as the author here is talking about wealth for all its shareholders. This is the third point. And the fourth point here is the idea of these enterprises is to act to be long living enterprises. So long living in the sense they have to be retaining in the market for quite long time. So with this longevity, they are going to enhance the efficiency of the organizations. So if you are asking, are there any examples out of it? Yes, there are many examples that are from Indian side itself, like TVS, we have Tata Group, Godrej Group, Bajaj Group. All these are well-known giants of Indian industrial sector, and they are fulfilling all the above criteria. Like it has a kind of trust and respect for its brands in India. Through their long term market standing, they are very efficient in their producing. They have also created a lot of wealth for their shareholders, and using this long criteria, they are making sure that their products are always standing in the market. So at the same time, the author here also gives example of some small giants who are medium in nature, but they are having all qualities to mature the community oriented ethical practices. For example, they are talking about Malayala Manorama, Nalli of Chennai. All these are some small giants that are in the rising. So with this, what were the features that were commonly present in these brands? So the author tells here that this idea is not novel to India, or the concept of enlightened capitalism is something that has been in India for quite long time. So if you have to analyze what was the historical dimensions of India's enterprises or industrial sections, we can talk about, it has been, this enlightened capitalism has already been an essential component of Indian trading companies for like centuries. We can give the example of Kachi Bhatiyas. These have been the traditional business community in the country. We have Memons, we have Marwaris. All these have been idea of Indian capitalism. They have a strong trading tradition, and they are also known for generous merchant charity. So India has been guided by the principles of these communities of trading. So the author also invokes the practices during the Sangam age in this article. So in Sangam age, the idea of enlightened capitalism has been mentioned in Silapadhikaram. This text is something familiar to all UPSC aspirants. So this text tells that generosity of traders has always been a hallmark of businesses done in the Sangam age. So basically, what the author is trying to tell is about Indian way of doing business. So with this, the author tries to give more ideas or tells how many other Indian features try to inspire our businessmen. So the other concept that has to be an inspiration for Indian business is Vedantic teachings that Vivekananda had mentioned in his 1893 speech of Chicago. So his speech had four important summaries to be mentioned. First one is be self aware. That is, know what is the reason you're doing the business for. The second one is protect the resources that help you do business. Protect the resources that help you do business. So basically, it is talking against over exploitation of resources here. The third one is serve others before serving yourself. So, this again is talking about the philanthropical angle of Indian enterprises. And the fourth one is act firmly but with compassion. Act firmly but with compassion. So, these were the 4 points that could be drawn from Vivekananda's speech at Chicago, which was instrumental in deepening India's ideas in the West. So, based on these teachings, Indian enterprises should be growing in the future, is the idea of the article. So the author in further tells that if Indian companies have to establish an international brand value, it needs to acquire and merge with Western companies. So in this, what is the lessons of acquisition is the idea. So the statistics tells that since 2018, Indian companies have registered 600 mergers. Okay, and 600 mergers and acquisitions. So, what is the way Indian companies merge and acquire business? The author tells that Indian companies, when they acquire the foreign companies, they usually do not impose the idea of Indianness on them. They try the employees, they make sure the employees and all other business partners of the companies that we acquired are remaining the same. Their practices are respected without imposing the practices of the one who has conquered it. So basically, the author tells that the collaborator, Indian companies have been collaborators with capabilities, but not conquerors or colonializers. So for this, the author has explained, given the example of Persian Empire. So, what is the example of Persian Empire here? One Persian Empire has always been one of the greatest empires in the past. During their peak time, they were ruling area almost from Greece to the Middle East. So, what made Persian Empire so popular is about they were tolerant of the conquered people. They allowed the people to retain their language, religion, and customs, thus making the empire's transition successful. But if you see or compare it to the conquests of the last two millennia, it is about how the conquerors tried to impose the customs of the conquerors on the indigenous people. You can see the example of British imposing its cultures on Australia and New Zealand, and today there are many quarrels going on with respect to retaining the cultural identity. So these countries are a lesson to the Indian companies, telling that Indian companies have always been the tolerant variety in acquisition, and one of the ways of establishing our international brand market in acquisition is to go the Indian way. So we can expect, or this topic is particularly relevant in GS paper 3, Indian economy, when we talk about the way forward for Indian economy's growth story, or to how to make sure that India Inc. is popular world over, or we gain market clarity in other countries. At the same time, GS paper 4 has many ideologies coming into picture. One of them would be enlightened capitalism or corporate governance. When we get a topic in this manner, what should be the way Indian companies should follow to have a morally sound investment principles? So for these two ideas, shareholder capitalism, as discussed in the previous episode, and enlightened capitalism would be a very good examples and unique examples in your answers. The second article for the day is related to India's health sector. We had left this out in the first week of December, so it can be included now in your notes. 12th of December is usually regarded as Universal Health Coverage Day, and recently on this December 12th, United Nations General Assembly has adopted a resolution on universal health coverage. That is, everyone can get access to essential health services without financial hardships. So, in related to this, there was a very good article that had come up in New Indian Express, and we'll just try to see the various dimensions of health to cover if we get this as a question in our GS paper 2. So, universal health coverage, health equity. So, use these kind of terms in your answers instead of simply giving health facilities to every citizen without by making sure their financial security also is there. Instead of the long sentences, you can replace them with health equity as the term. They will be more appealing in your answers and give a kind of technicality to the question you're trying to address. So here, universal healthcare is not just about healthcare. We may be thinking that it is about giving good health facilities to the public, but universal healthcare goes beyond health. And when we provide equity angle to it, that is giving access to everybody in an affordable manner, it leads to economic growth of the country. And when economic growth is achieved, it also leads to overall well-being of the individuals. So it is a win-win story not only for the government entity on the social sector, but also for the economic growth of the country. So universal healthcare is also one of the important targets given to us under Sustainable Development Goal under Target 3.8. So, what is the idea here? To give health care services to everybody, access to everybody by 2030 as the target year. So, basically, it is focusing on three major dimensions. This representation would be useful for your answers as well. So, what are the three dimensions? First is the population coverage. So, population coverage basically will talk about who should get the universal health coverage benefits. And the second idea here will be the second dimensions will be service coverage. So, what is the meaning of this? It is talking about the scope of services and the quality of services that this organization or the government will provide to the people. The third dimension is about financial coverage. So, what financial coverage is talking about? Protection from financial ruins. So, these three are the major dimensions of Sustainable Development Goal 3.8. And what we need to follow is how to bridge the gap between the three dimensions that we are talking about. So, already we have many success stories in front of us. Some of them are international examples like Thailand. So, Thailand's health model has been greatly discussed world over as it was introduced in the year 2000, and the means and the purpose was to give universal health coverage to all its citizens. And now, in the year 2024, 99% of the people have been covered. That is, 99% coverage has been achieved, giving the means to health access for 99% of the population. In the same way, we can talk about Japan, Germany, Sri Lanka, Turkey. They all have demonstrated how inclusive healthcare system can transform lives and drive progress of a country. So, what is the growth story of India, or what is the journey India has followed with respect to universal health coverage? So, whenever you get a question related to a sector like health, education, and others, we first need to mention what India has already done for the purpose for achieving the goal, and then go on to criticize what are the gap that is left in the system. We cannot directly jump to the part where we are criticizing the system without appreciating the work the government has already done. So the first achievement here is National Health Policy of 2017, which came with the means for primary health care by establishing health centers, and they also had the target of preventive health care services and equitable access. So, with these three parameters, national health policy was allocated, and the target was to increase the share of health expenditure in India's GDP to 2.5%. Okay, these were the main targets. The second most important factor here is Pradhan Mantri Ayushman Ayushman Bharat Ayushman Bharat Pradhan Mantri uh, Arogya Yojana. So, this is the scheme we have already spoken about, where it is also the world's largest government funded health insurance scheme. So, by 2023, it had already enrolled somewhere around 50 crore beneficiaries and had given benefits to somewhere around 4 crore hospitalization from the day of its enactment, that is in 2018. So, we also have many success stories in India where our states are showing us the path to sustainable health sector. That is, in the case of Tamil Nadu, there is a strong drug procurement system that will make sure that for people medicines are available free of cost and the stocks are always maintained. We also have the example of Kerala state, where primary health care is focused to a great extent. With this, we see that we are already started journey towards India's universal health coverage idea. but now comes, how far are we from being universal? So, for this, we can talk about the very low patient doctor ratio that we are portraying. Patient doctor ratio in India is abysmal, we can tell. Uh, Patient and doctor ratio is very much less, and there are lack of hospital beds in the country, lack of trained workforce. And even if you take about community health centers, in 83% of the community health centers there are no surgeons who perform uh, critical operations. 75% of the community health centers do not have gynecologists in them. So, as a result, what has happened is the private hospitals are getting all the benefits. Private hospitals cornering all the health benefits, thus deepening the divide between rich and poorer sections of the society again. So, why this has happened also is because of the lack of insurance coverage in the country. So the private insurance is very much less. Even the public insurance and in the form of Ayushman Bharat has not reached the targeted population yet. As a result, there is a huge amount of out of pocket expenditure where a person has to spend money from their own savings. There are chances where a family comes down to poverty line after a medical emergency in the family. So, in addition to this, India today faces a huge challenge in the form of demographic shift. What is this demographic shift? We have seen that of late, India's population is aging. Even in our ICANN episode, we have covered many instances of geriatric care and how India needs to age gracefully. So, in demographic changes, elderly population currently are 8.6% of our population. But by the time we go to 2050, it is going to be 20% of our population. So, we have to focus more on the health care of the senior citizens, whereas our infrastructure is not tuned to cater to the needs of this aging population. Last but not the least, a very important topic here is there is epidemiological shift as well. So, what is the meaning of this epidemiological shift? It is about the kind of diseases Indians are succumbing to these days have also shifted to a great extent, coming from communicable diseases in the long past like malaria, tuberculosis, leprosy, and all of these. Currently, the rate of death in Indians are more from non-communicable diseases like, let's say, diabetes, cancer, cardiovascular diseases. So, this is the shift that we are seeing in our epidemiological perspective. So, what is our health system focused on? It is even now focused more on maternal and child health care. But this idea of age appropriate illness management and based on non communicable disease management, we have still not focused the attention on. So, what is the idea or what is the field we need to focus on is the next point of our discussion. So, universal health coverage must address disparities across gender. It's not focused on only one aspect of the society. It should also take note of residence of the citizens, class of a person, caste, and also religious identity of a person when we are covering them. The second idea is a very regular concept of telling rise in budgetary allocation, which is the crux of all the reforms in the health sector we talk about. The third one is health insurance need to be integrated with informal sector of the society. Especially this is with respect to Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana, which needs to focus more on roping in private or informal section workers. The fourth one is strengthening the role of ASHA workers. Here is very important for community outreach and health awareness. We have done almost 2 to 3 episodes on ASHA workers' importance already. The fifth one is preventive health campaigns need to be done, especially for non-communicable diseases. Preventive health is the one source where India can save a lot of money and lives by campaigning these kind of ideas. The sixth one is a very interesting idea of public private partnerships in underserved areas where a government presence is not there. Philanthropic private organizations and hospitals can be encouraged by the governments under CSR activities. So, at the end or the conclusion part of this article was that how we are moving forward in taking this Ayushman Bharat idea well is by digitalization of whole health records. So, this would be the basis or the crux from where we can take the whole progress of health sector to a great level by integrating modern technologies. So, conclusion has always should always be in an optimistic manner to give an idea that for every problem there can be a solution provided we just look into it from an optimistic lens. So even in this topic we can end by concluding that how government also already is doing something like digitalization mission for health records. That could be the starting point of our universalization of health coverage. The third topic is based on an editorial that had come in the last week. It's about Petrov's dilemma and AI. So, this is a very beautiful representation of how ethics and AI have confrontations with each other with the coming up of AI as a popular means of human beings in their daily usage. So, we have already been asked in GS paper 4 on ethical perspectives of artificial intelligence. But this article's analysis I felt very useful because it covered various dimensions of how AI lacks ethics and how a new establishment or how governing entities should try to make that AI tools should have certain ethical values ingrained in them. Is it possible to train them, or should we still delve deeper into the mechanisms of accepting AI to automate many of our regularly decided works? So we'll start with the story that was told in this article. It's not exactly a story. It is an incident that took place in 1983 amidst the Cold War era between USA and USSR. So in 1983, USSR's OCO early warning system. So this early warning system's work was to detect any kind of nuclear activities arising from the US soil. This early warning system issued a critical alert signaling a kind of dangerous nuclear attack from USA. So based on this signal, officer on duty Stanislav Petrov, he came into a dilemma whether to take an action and try to ready their military force or probably attack the USA back even before their nuclear weapon reaches USSR, or to go by human intuition and have a trust in the system telling that it might not be a nuclear weapon attack. So this was the dilemma faced by Petrov as a officer on duty. I hope you got it. That is, the decision was whether to trust what this early warning system is telling and lodging an attack on USA, or going by human intuition to make a call whether to attack USA or not. So what was the exact situation that happened here was the satellites on which this OCO early warning system was based and algorithms on which this system was based actually malfunctioned. They tried to interpret sunlight reflected from high altitude clouds as missile launches. So just imagine if an officer on duty had trusted this particular information of the center system and launched an attack on USA. the history would have been different today. That is, this whole instance has prevented a nuclear catastrophe from happening. So this is the dilemma that is popularly called as Petrov's dilemma. That is, whether to trust a system or to go by human intuition. So remember this story to use in your essays as well, where you get any question on technology and human mind, or the future of the world is based on the mind stories, was a similar essay that had come up recently. So based on these ideas, you can start your essay with. So what are the dilemma, or what are the challenges we face with artificial intelligence currently? The first challenge is about uh, India AI Safety Institute. That is, in India, there has been an effort to create a multifaceted institute called India AI Safety Institute that will deal with various challenges that AI is portraying for the present world, and how to deal with these challenges to make sure AI is more accommodative of human needs, and it is not creating a problem for law and order, and it is equitable in its distribution and the other likes. So basically, making AI accessible, equitable, and ethical is the crux behind India AI Safety Institute. So there are many global players who have already been into the race, and they have created safety institute like this. But most of them, they have focused on adversarial testing, that is putting AI under some dangerous condition, and how the AI responds in that condition they'll be tested. So adversarial testing is one of the tests they are put into. Methodologies for mitigating risks is integrated, that is trying to reduce the biases that AI's tools will come with, trying to reduce the manipulations AI tools are built with. So these are the works that already international or global players in AI safety institutes are already doing. But the author in this article is telling that when we are opening a system like this, Indian entity should also focus on inbuilding certain ethical questions into the AI tool. Correct? So, with this, there are many ethical questions that are asked by the author here. You can note them down. They are very much relevant to use in our answer. So the first AI tool, or the first challenge that this institute needs to focus on, will include uh, what AI system should understand risk as. So basically, risk taking needs to be understood by AI system, but what kind of risks they need to be understanding, that is one of the important questions raised. The second one is, how can AI system differentiate between a signal and a noise? So this distinction has to be made by AI models. How can they do this is something we need to integrate. So for this, it needs to be trained properly. That is a crux, and how to train them is the question. So the C, or the next part here, is how do we embed systems with humanity? How can we include the humanity angle in the whole AI system? So basically, we can bring a kind of Venn diagram here where we talk about philosophical ways of human mind. One is the philosophical idea, the other part is the ethical idea, and the system design needs to integrate all this, giving birth to something that we call safe AI. So remember to represent this image in your answers, talking about philosophical, ethical system design that will integrate something that we call as safe artificial intelligence. So the first challenge we can talk about in detail is epistemic reliability. So what do we mean by epistemic reliability? It means that uh, trustworthiness of a source or method in providing knowledge. Let's say we rely on some AI tool to gain some information about a project or anything. So how trustworthy is this AI tool in giving this information is what we talk about epistemic reliability. So how do we ensure that the machine which is giving us the information aligns with truth in high stake scenarios? That is where we are having a lot of risks in front of us. How do we trust the knowledge this machine is having? Especially use this term called high stake scenarios. So in this, can we really trust the machines is the question. So this is one of the problems that the AI faces is whatever information they give, they are bound to make errors. And if these decisions we make are based on errors, the outcomes may impact many people beyond our imagination. So whether a system is having epistemic reliability is a question that we need to raise. Okay, then other questions for AI is that, yes, other question is for AI versus human. That is, AI systems are based on probabilistic manners, models, and ideas. Correct? It is based on the models in which most probable sentence or statement would be predicted, and the AI systems would be trained for it in machine learning. So they are programmed to infer conclusions from data patterns that they are fed. So, what if a real situation arises which is not similar to any of these data patterns? How would AI take decisions in this case is a big question mark. And when it comes to, or when we compare this AI tool with how humans process knowledge and take decisions, humans draw their decisions based on the knowledge that they have about the particular project or a particular event, and this knowledge is based on experiences that they have had in their life. In addition to this, their knowledge or their decision also based on the context of the decision that they are standing to take. At the same time, they also will take into consideration uncertainties that are creeping in. So human knowledge is not based on any data patterns or algorithms, but they're based on the pre-existing knowledge, experience, context, and uncertainties. So this highlights the idea distinction between how computing and knowing is completely two different ideas. So, coming to the next question is the ethical question of difference. So, these are very good usage of terms in your GS paper 4. So, do note them and suggest it to your friends who are writing mains in the coming year, who are planning to improve in their mains basically. So, ethical questions of difference is talking about the moral dilemma of when and to what extent one should rely on or differ from someone else. So, let's say somebody is giving us a suggestion on how to lose weight. So the suggestion would be including, let's say, going for intermittent fasting or trying to do some other popular diet that is available. So as a person, will we completely trust them and try to follow this from the very next day, or will we think that will all these suit my body, are they scientifically based, or are they really healthy, or will it really suit my body type? So to what extent will you trust these suggestions, to what extent will you reject these suggestions, and to what extent you are ready to accept them? So this is what we call a moral dilemma of difference. So, when we talk about it, is all about balancing between one's own trust in others' knowledge and one's own responsibility for making certain decisions. So, the question here is, should artificial intelligence always defer to humans in critical cases? That is, when we give any critical question to artificial intelligence, should it always go and trust should it always give decision based on the data it is fed into, or differ and take a separate stand on its own, or work autonomously is what we can call autonomously is without having any human input, to match up to the idea of speed, for the reason which we have adapted AI tools. So let's say there is an autonomous weapon system, and this weapon system, should it differ, or should it also have this moral difference, or should it go on uh, autonomy, or let's say simply working based on the instructions given to it, because speed is something we need. That is the reason why autonomous weapon systems have been in place, to be specific. But when that question comes, if it was a machine instead of the officer on duty in case of Russian example we took in the beginning, the machine would probably have decided to launch an attack because according to it the alert is sound enough. But as it was a human being, the human decided not to trust this completely, took a call to rely more on one's own responsibility to save life and defend the nation, not just taking revenge from the opposition side. So this is something that would be lacking when we talk about AI tools and automation of defense systems especially. So the next idea that the author discussed is ontology of agency, that is, are AI systems independent agents? Independent agents capable of making decisions themselves, or are they mere extensions of human intent? So are they independent or extensions of human intent? So if we are able to distinguish, we can definitely make the best use of AI. But the problem is, as the AI systems grow more and more complex, these boundaries are nothing but going to blur. So in that case, making choices would be very challenging. So the next idea here is value pluralism. So value pluralism is about a concept told by Isaiah Berlin. So Isaiah Berlin's concept tells that multiple conflicting values are equally fundamental and they are valid when a person is trying to take a decision. So as we know, various emotions are packed into a person when they are making decision. It's not always based on just facts and figures. So this multiple values or multiple sets of values are needed in to go into one decision making. So the system or the AI system that we are talking about, it needs to be capable of integrating multiple values while recognizing that which value to use in which particular context. So that decision making tool needs to be ingrained in the AI when India is at the crux of developing is an AI tool that is safe for India, or an entity that is talking about AI safety. So this value pluralism is a boon for human beings who have been raised with multiple values in their life, and which packet of values to use during which time is a sound decision that human knowledge makes. But what are these values that needs to go into AI, which values needs to be used during which context, under which circumstances, is a tough call for AI to make as of now. So as a conclusion, the author tells that participatory governance mechanism is to be the way ahead when we are trying to use AI in many parts of our daily life, where multiple stakeholders needs to be involved, which includes policy makers, which include ethicists who are talking about ethics. We need technology experts and civil society. So these stakeholders together need to make AI more safer and more useful for humans without raising much ethical questions. So this has been quite long a discussion about the ethics topic, but do note down, even if not the entire article, parts of them would be very much relevant to be used in your answers. Let's say you get a question on importance of value, human values. You can use why human values are essential for an ethical world by comparing with AI tools that do not have values in them as of now. So try to integrate these when you're writing your answers. The topic of our discussion is about kind of joyful news and a positive news coming up from Taiwan, where a grandmother who is 90 years old was seen weightlifting, and it's kind of sending a positive and optimistic notes to the world when we are ending 2024 and all ready to welcome the new year with new resolutions. So this topic is about a woman who is suffering from various disabilities, which is due to her age, and her granddaughter who encourages her to take up physical training so that she'll be able to overcome all the mental illness and the physical illness. The mental illness, or we can say the disease that she was suffering from, is Parkinson's disease. So to overcome all these challenges, her granddaughter encouraged her to go for physical fitness, and the grandmother has adopted it, and today she is creating a lot of waves across the world. So where this topic would be relevant to us, so basically it's nothing but an example of how One's own resolution like this can send positive waves to everybody else, trying to create a motivating feeling in others, and into encouraging others also to take up a challenge like this. So basically we can talk about the concept of resilience and human spirit here. So the name of the woman here is Cheng Chen. So do remember her story. It could be a very good topic for our essay papers, especially. So it is illustrating that what does not kill a human being inside is that anything that makes them stronger. So any idea that makes a woman stronger or makes a person stronger, it is that idea that needs to be taken up. So in this case, the growth and transformation that the person has undergone, it is all because of the resilience of human spirit. So at the same time, this resilience is applicable to many times in our daily lives itself. That is determination and resilience, which will help us to go closer towards our goals. So the next idea is about intergenerational solidarity that we can talk about. We have seen that in countries like Japan, Taiwan as well, where the average age is going to be somewhere around too high, and people who are 65 years and above are increasing in number. So we have Italy, where population is rising, age old population is rising. France has a very bad fertility rate now, according to the country, that 1.6 is their fertility rate. So at the end of the day, we see that population is aging very quickly. So in such a time, intergenerational solidarity is very important, where younger generations stand with the adults and the aged population so that their challenging phases in the evening of their life is met. So when the whole world is seeing a demographic change, India would also be at a cusp of this kind of demography in the near future. And this intergenerational solidarity seen in this case, where the granddaughter encourages the grandmother for physical fitness, is something that is worth remembering and using in our answers. So the next topic with respect to this idea is self-actualization. So basically we have a psychological theory called Maslow's need hierarchy theory, where basic needs are all fulfilled, and at the end of the needs is self-actualization. That is, it is the last deal or last kind of need that a person would like to fulfill when all their basic requirement of food, shelter, clothing, love, professional success, when all of them have been achieved, the self actualization need is for a person's soul satisfying. Hence, this self actualization need doesn't have an age barrier. So, if you see, at 90 years, when a person can adapt a healthy lifestyle and work for making a body stronger, self actualization needs for others also can be focused on. So it is proving that the quest for growth and fulfillment is lifelong. You need not be having an age restriction here. So at the same time, we can talk about body as a medium of empowerment. That is, especially when a person is aged or whenever they're getting older, physically there are many ailments that people that somebody come across. So this physical ailment pushes the mental health down as well. So as a result, the whole process of aging will become disgraceful, or they would not be enjoying the process, and this would not be a feasible way of becoming older. Hence, if we use the body as a medium of one's empowerment, let's say cultivating physical and mental well-being through disciplined effort is definitely a path to achieving a flourishing life. So body as a medium of empowerment is a very good example we can also use in our ideas related to how various food campaignings is going on to adapt a healthy lifestyle, and we should use our body as a source of our empowerment. So, next idea here is about breaking social constructs. That is, there are some activities. We know the society has been very much graded and kind of allocates duties and functions to everybody. It may be to different genders, it may be to different people of the age group, it may be to people of different regions, it may be to people of different caste. Everybody is given a duty by the society. But this social construct is broken by the grandmother here by telling that age is definitely not a factor for adopting transforming changes. So basically, fitness is something that is usually celebrated virtue for youngsters or people who are in their midlife. but elderly person adopting a fit lifestyle is something that is a kind of breaking social barriers, telling that societal constraints of aging as a period of decline kind of, it is something where you have to go only for adopting spirituality, not all the fitness of the physical idea. This has been tarnished, or this has been broken and shattered by the grandmother in this case. So these were very good, this was a very good example and a very lively way of beginning our 2025 if we are focusing on our health. So some quotes I found relevant. If you get essays in this manner, you can use the idea of Cheng Chen's enthusiasm in her 90 years of age to start your essay with. One of them is, it is not the years in your life that count, but the life in your years that matter more. So it's told by Abraham Lincoln. So it's basically talking about the quality of life rather than the length of a person's life. At the same time, we have another quote here: whatever the mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. So basically, it's talking about determination and telling that if you decide something, the mind is so strong that you can steer your whole success based on the mental strength all alone. So, for these kind of essay topics, the story of Cheng Chen is very much influential. So, the last article for today is paying it forward. That is, in the previous episode, we had seen the uh, power of silence. So, in the same way, today we'll see the power of smile. So, if you would be wondering why are we talking about smile, if you recall, 2022 essay paper had a question directly on the importance of smile as a kind of solution to all the problems. So, this article was this was the essay topic, that is, a smile is the chosen vehicle for all ambiguities. So, this was a very good article where the author was talking about a sincere smile, or smile which is coming genuinely out of one's heart. So, this sincere smile gives birth to a chain reaction. So, what is the chain reaction here? It is the chain reaction of kindness that reaches across different parts of the community. So, in whom can we find the sincere smile? It is mainly in the children, young toddlers and children, whose smile is nothing but an outward expression of the divine consciousness within them. So, they'll have no biases, they'll be having no filters in their smile, or we can say they'll be having no intention of flattering anybody or anything. The smile is just pure divine consciousness. So this sincere smile, in such a particular smile which is very sincere, we can always find love, we can find a kind of happiness in it. There is a visibility of compassion in such smiles, and also there is a virtue of patience in such smiles. So, as a result, smile is nothing but a light that dispels the darkness of sorrow and disappointment from the hearts of other people. So, this author here tells a small story which is very interesting. And if you got the question in this format, in this kind of essays, these stories or interesting stories like this can actually make a lot of difference in your essays. So, this is about a man who is standing very dejected, very depressed on the road, not knowing what to do. Such a man encounters a sweet smile given by a girl who just cross each other's path. So, when this girl extends a smile to the dejected man, he feels so positive that he starts thinking that when I've lost everything in life, at least there is one small person who is looking at me and giving me a humble smile. So, this sets in a lot of positive emotions in the man, and he decides that there was a very good friend of his in his life who had helped him a lot during his bad days, and he starts thinking that I actually miss this friend, and writes a heartfelt letter to his friend. So, upon receiving this letter, the friend, let us call him B, this friend is so elated and happy about receiving a letter from his old friend after many years. So, out of this happiness, he gives, let's say, 10 rupees to the postman who brings the letter. So, this postman is also happy that he got an extra tip of 10. He goes and invests this in a lottery. So fortunately, this lottery is a victorious one, and he wins a huge amount of money in this lottery. And when he goes withdraws the money from the bank that he has won in the lottery and was walking, he finds a old man, a beggar in the streets, who is injured and who is very unwell. So he feels that I anyway have a lot of money. Why don't I spend it on the treatment of the old beggar here? So he takes the old beggar to the hospital, gives him good treatment, and sends him with positive feeling. So this old man, who is now well to walk and is capable of managing his own life, when he is very thankful to this attitude of the postman, he comes out to create a life for himself when he finds that a small dog, a puppy, has been uh, stuck in a muddle where it's not able to come out, and it's just stuck. So he feels that I have been helped by somebody, so in the same way I also should help others. So he goes and rescues this puppy, cleans it, gives it a shower, and takes the puppy with him. So along with this animal becomes very faithful to the beggar here, and both of them keep walking to some distance. So when the nightfall happens, they come across a home, and as it's a cold winter night, they ask a shelter in the home and tell that we'll sleep in the outside or just in the vicinity of the home. Please give us the permission to sleep. So upon seeing the beggar and the dog, the people in the house generously offer them to sleep in the backyard. So when everybody in the house will be sleeping, this dog continuously keeps on barking. So upon noticing that the dog is continuously barking, the beggar wakes up only to see that the house is on fire, especially the room in which the family's only child is sleeping. That room is on fire. So upon the barking of the dog, the house owners are alerted about the fire, and they immediately rescue this child, and the child is safe, and the house has averted a huge disaster altogether. So if you see the small story, this child today is safe because some girl somewhere in other part of the same city smiled at a stranger who was standing in a very dejected way. So you can see the chain reaction that one smile has created. This could be a very beautiful representation of smile in your answers. So these kind of introduction or stories would make it very interesting in your answers or essays. So again, you can conclude, or you can just put an end to this story part by telling that even if we can't help people in a big way, many a times we find that we may not have resources, or we may not have sufficient time, and let's say we don't have a combination of both to help someone. Just a small sincere smile telling that we understand you, this smile to those people who are hurt, to the people who are lonely, and just few words of love, lovely speaking to them, it makes a lot of difference. So if we are able to give happiness to one soul in this way, even for one moment in our life, it is considered that our life has become fulfilled, or the life is blessed. So even when we can't help people in a big way, smiles can make a lot of difference, is the story, or is the concluding part of this topic. So stay with us with more such essays and answer enriching examples. And whatever we have not covered in the past 2 days of the last week, we will try to integrate it in the coming ICANN episodes. So stay with us, and do recommend and continue watching our videos, and be active in the comment section so that we can know what inputs you want from our end to improve your answer writing skills. Thank you so much.